All television and radio stations in the United States will now cease their regular programming.
What I've discovered is there's no proof existing anywhere that extraterrestrials are real or that have ever visited this planet or that they exist anywhere in the universe. There is not one shred of evidence anywhere. There is lots of evidence, tons of it in fact, that there are a group of people collectively known as the Illuminati who want us to believe in some extraterrestrial threat from space so that they can cause a world government, bringing together of all the people to resist that external threat. The first time that I saw any reference to that, I was reading some papers from the Carnegie Endowment Fund, and there was a record of a speech. It was a dinner for Viscount Ishii of the Japanese delegation, the Japanese imperial delegation, in 1917. And John Dewey was one of the speakers. And the first sentence out of his mouth, as I was reading this, I almost fell out of my chair, because this was in 1917, and he said the best way to cause all the people of the world to come together in one world government and end war forever would be if we were attacked by some other species from some other planet. And boy, that just clicked with me, and I knew that this is just another scam. This is the age of deception. There's no doubt about it. And then 8 times during Reagan's administration, he inserted almost the exact same phrase into 8 of his speeches. And it's a scam. That's what I can tell you.
The late William Cooper there, and just because I played that clip doesn't mean I believe everything that William Cooper said. I don't believe anything any man says unless you can verify it in our Father's Word. And Bill Cooper did have pieces of the puzzle, what he was saying there. The Illuminati have a plan for a one-world government, and that this alien hoax plays into it. We know of the existence of the Illuminati, that is to say the Kenites, the sons of Cain, and their 4 hidden dynasties of education, economics, politics, and religion. Education including the mainstream media, and that includes the perpetuation of this extraterrestrial psyop. But there will be a one-world system, as we know from our Father's Word, from Daniel chapter 7. You have the blueprint of it there, including the Kenites, symbolized by the leopard, and their 4 hidden dynasties. That's why it has 4 heads. And it also includes the king of the north, which is Esau. That's the bear, the communistic, anti-Christian nations, and that includes Ishmael as well. Remember that Esau married one of the daughters of Ishmael. It goes all the way back to the book of Genesis. And then you have the lion, symbolic of the Christian nations, and Daniel's 4th beast. And that's what we're talking about as far as the supernatural are concerned, and those vehicles that we can read of in our Father's Word. Daniel's 4th beast is exclusively supernatural. That's Satan and his angels, who are cast from heaven to the earth at the beginning of the 5-month-long hour of temptation. All 4 of those beasts in Daniel chapter 7 arise out of the sea, which is symbolic of people, simultaneously at the same time. That's why it says the 4 winds there. That's always symbolic of that 5-month-long hour of temptation. So Daniel's 4th beast being the supernatural, how do you align that with the alien hoax, the invasion of that locust army, which are Satan's angels exclusively? Everything we've seen so far and what we're seeing now are merely types, as you can verify for yourself from the book of Joel. The locust army are strictly supernatural. You can also verify this from Revelation chapter 9. They don't kill people. What army doesn't kill people? The locust army. It's an army of deception. And they do travel in vehicles that are known today as flying saucers. And it's documentable in our Father's Word that that's the case. Is it necessary that we see the vehicles? No. But it could very well be that whenever Satan and his angels are cast out of heaven unto the earth, that's what triggers the political system The existential threat of that, as it will be portrayed by the mainstream media, will bring the world together in a one-world system to fight the quote-unquote aliens, but they're really the fallen angels written of in Revelation chapter 12, where you see there's a war in heaven, and then Satan and his angels are cast from heaven unto the earth. And then in verse 12 of that chapter, it says, Woe unto the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is cast down unto you, having great wrath, for he knoweth that he hath but a short time. Why does it say the earth and the sea? Because the political beast emerges out of the sea, and it has to have all four ingredients, including the supernatural, Daniel's fourth beast, the one with the 10 horns. It doesn't literally rise up out of the sea. The sea is symbolic of peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues, as we know from Revelation chapter 17. Where we also learn that those 10 horns are symbolic of 10 kings, 10 fallen angel kings, they're supernatural, that reign 1 hour with the beast, the hour of temptation, which was originally 7 years, but as we know from Mark 13, the Lord has shortened the days for the elect's sake, and it's been shortened to a 5-month period, as we know from Revelation chapter 9. Going to Isaiah chapter 5, and beginning with verse 25, we can read of that locust army in the last verses of Isaiah chapter 5. Therefore is the anger of the Lord kindled against his people, and he has stretched forth his hand against them. God is in total control of these events that transpire at the end of this generation of the fig tree. God is on the throne, always has been, always will be. Nothing can happen without his permission. And has smitten them, and the hills did tremble, and their carcasses were torn in the midst of the streets. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. And he will lift up an ensign to the nations from far, and will hiss unto them from the end of the earth. And behold, they shall come with speed swiftly. None shall be weary nor stumble among them. Similar language you'll find in Joel concerning that locust army. Historically, the type were the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, that is to say, but this looks forward to what happens during that 5-month-long hour of temptation. None shall slumber nor sleep. Now, human beings sleep, so this is speaking of supernatural entities, the fallen angels. Neither shall the girdle of their loins be loosed, nor the latchet of their shoes be broken, whose arrows are sharp, and their bows bent. Their horses' hoofs shall be counted like flint. And what's it say in Revelation chapter 9? The sound of their wings was as many horses running to battle. What are their wings? They don't have wings on their backs. They travel in flying vehicles. And back in the days when Isaiah and Ezekiel and Daniel and Joel were written, if something was flying, it must have wings. They had no point of reference to understand flying vehicles, but they saw them. Whose arrows are sharp and their bows bent. This is spiritually. Their horses' hoofs shall be counted like flint, and here's what gives it away, their wheels like a whirlwind. And if you've studied Ezekiel chapter 1, you see the whirlwind written of there, and the highly polished spectrum metal vehicle, it appeared to be highly polished spectrum metal vehicle, and the vehicles there are described as wheels as well, only it's speaking of our Father and the 4 living creatures that surround his throne in Ezekiel chapter 1. That's the positive, but for every positive there's a negative. Here in Isaiah chapter 5, we're reading of the locust army and their vehicles, their wheels like a whirlwind. Their roaring shall be like a lion, just as it's written in Joel and Revelation 9, comparing them to lions. And this has to do with how a lion kills its prey, but we're speaking spiritually here. They don't kill people. They kill them spiritually, but not physically. They torment them for 5 months in 4 stages. 1 locust, 4 stages, and the first stage, the gnawer stage, begins at the beginning of that 5-month period. Then you go into the swarmer, the devourer, then the deadly wound, and then the 4th and final stage, the consumer stage of the locust army. And it could be that they're not seen visibly until the 6th seal, the 6th trumpet, and the 6th vial. But we don't know. We'll have to wait and see. That's speculation. Their roaring shall be like a lion. They shall roar like young lions. Yea, they shall roar and lay hold of the prey, speaking spiritually here, they tear people's souls apart if they don't have the seal of God in their forehead, because they're an army of deception, and shall carry it away safe, and none shall deliver it. And in that day, the 5-month period just prior to the day of the Lord, the 1,000 years that begin upon the return of the true Christ, in that day they shall roar against them like the roaring of the sea. Remember what the sea is symbolic of: peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And if one looketh unto the land, behold, darkness and sorrow, and the light is darkened in the heavens thereof. The sun and the moon are darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit, and from that smoke comes the locusts. But they're not literally locusts. They're Satan's angels that are cast out of heaven with him at the woe of the 5th trumpet. And then you have the beginning of the stages of the locust army, for real this time, not the types. And then in the middle, as I said before, the 4th and final stage, the consumer stage of the locust army. And as you can read in Revelation chapter 9, it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree. So these obviously aren't really locusts, but are symbolic of the fallen angels. But only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads, those who don't know the truth of our Father's word, will be deceived at that time, letting you know that it's an army of deception. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. And when a scorpion stings someone, it doesn't kill them immediately. It takes time. It kills them in stages. And when you apply that to spiritual terms, then you understand that the stages of the locust don't occur until the 5 months begin. And in those days shall men seek death and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. Once the true Christ returns at the end of that 5-month-long hour of temptation, they'll want to die, because they'll realize at that time that they've been deceived by Satan and his locust army, and they worship Satan thinking that he was Jesus' return. So when the true Christ returns, they'll be so ashamed they'll want to die. But you can't die in a spiritual body. They'll have to go through the millennium, getting their act together, and stand against Satan after the 1,000 years are finished, whereby they go into the 3rd world age, that is to say, the eternity. Or they can follow Satan after the 1,000 years are finished and be blotted out in the lake of fire. The choice is yours. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses. Remember, we saw horses mentioned in Isaiah chapter 5, prepared unto battle. And on their heads were as it were crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men. They look like humans, but they're not. They're angels. They don't have wings like a bird. They simply travel in flying vehicles. And again, if you saw something like that around 500 BC or somewhere thereabouts, you would think that it had wings, because everything else you'd seen beforehand had wings that was flying like a bird or an insect or a locust. And they had hair as the hair of women. They appeared to be very gentle, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions. They'll tear your soul apart if you have not the seal of God in your forehead. And we saw lions written of in Isaiah 5 as well as their wheels like the whirlwind. And they had breastplates, as it were, breastplates of iron. Remember, Daniel's 4th beast has great iron teeth, and the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running to battle. There you have the flying vehicles described again. And why would our Father mention the vehicles of the fallen angels so many times if it weren't need-to-know information? Again, it's not necessary that we see these vehicles, but I feel it's highly probable that the one world system will come together once there's an apparent invasion from outer space. But what it really is Satan and his angels. And that's why the Kenites put out so much propaganda, setting people up to be deceived whenever this happens, possibly. And they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months, split into 2.5 month periods, with the first 3 stages of the locust army in the first half hour of the hour of temptation, the first 2.5 months, that is to say. Then after the deadly wound to the one world system, Satan appears, and the 4th and final stage begins and ends with the true Christ returning at the 7th trumpet. That's how that 5-month-long hour of temptation works, according to my calculations, but you're not supposed to listen to any man without checking it out in your Father's Word. Study to show yourself approved. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit. Guess who this is? It's Satan, that's right, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. That means the destroyer, in 2 different languages, in Hebrew and Greek, the destroyer. One woe is past, and behold, there come 2 woes more hereafter. Now, why would it say 1 woe is past? Could it be because the woe of the 5th trumpet was that one world political system? Once it's wounded to death, that woe is past, because the woe of the 6th trumpet is when Satan appears, and it goes from being a one world political system to a one world religious system. And the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the 6th angel which had the trumpet, Loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And this lets you know that this is when Satan appears at the 6th trumpet, the 6th seal, and the 6th vial, that's 666, because the 4 living creatures that we read of in Revelation chapters 4 and 5 surround our Father's throne. Again, for every positive, there's a negative. These are the 4 angels loosed from the Euphrates that no doubt surround Satan's throne whenever he appears as the false Christ and sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God, as it's written in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year for to slay the 3rd part of men spiritually. And this speaks of Christendom, because only Christians can die spiritually. Only they have the promise of eternal life abiding within them. There's no other way to the Father except through the Lord Jesus Christ. But whenever a Christian begins to worship the devil, they're no longer a Christian. And there you have the spiritual death of the 3rd part of men. Everybody else was dead already, leaving only those with the seal of God in their forehead. As far as the many-membered body of Christ is concerned, they remain virgins, spiritually speaking, as opposed to becoming part of the whore of Babylon, as this 3rd do. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them. 2 myriads of myriads, and you also have to figure into the equation that this will be televised. It would look like a lot more than it actually is over a televised image, and the image of the beast you can read of in Revelation chapter 13. That's simply an image of Satan, because that image of the beast is worshipped. Satan exalts himself above all that is called God or worshipped, so when you put 2 and 2 together, it's not hard to figure out what that image of the beast is. It's an image of Satan, and they will worship him via satellite. And thus I saw the horses in the vision. And remember when Elijah was taken up in the whirlwind, speaking of those vehicles again, but that's on the positive end of the spectrum. But regardless, it says the chariots and the horses. Horses are mentioned, not literally horses, but the mode of transportation used by angelic entities. And thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire and of jacinth and brimstone, and the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions. There's lions once again, letting you know that this is the same group that we were reading of earlier in Revelation chapter 9. This is the locust army, only this is the 4th and final stage of the locust army, the consumer stage. And out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. That's deception. The deception that Christ has returned, but it's really Satan at that time, at the 6th seal, the 6th trumpet, and the 6th vial. Only those with the seal of God in their forehead are aware of that, and that's why they'll be delivered up, at which time the Holy Spirit will speak through them, as you can read of in Mark chapter 13. By these 3 was the 3rd part of men killed. No gender there, a 3rd part of humanity, by the fire and by the smoke and by the brimstone which issued out of their mouths. It's deception that it's talking about here. That's what comes out of someone's mouth. For their power is in their mouth, because it's an army of deception. They don't literally kill people. It's spiritually speaking here. And in their tails, for their tails were like unto serpents, and had heads, and with them they do hurt. It's Satan's locust army, that old serpent, the devil, the dragon. And the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues, yet repented not of the works of their hands. In other words, they were dead already, is why they weren't killed by these plagues. They were spiritually dead already because they weren't Christians. That they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone and of wood. These are the false religions of the world, which neither can see nor hear nor walk. Neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, that's poisoning people with drugs, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts. So there you have it. That's what's going to happen, but praise be to God, because of what God will say through his election, many will come out of Babylon, that is to say confusion, repenting, realizing what's really going on, and take part in the first resurrection, going into the millennium with eternal souls, meaning they're good to go up through the eternity. They're saved, in other words. Everybody else has to wait until after the 1,000 years are finished. As it's written, the rest of the dead live not until the 1,000 years were finished. They have to stand against Satan after that, after the day of the Lord, when Satan is let loose from his prison for a short season, and stand against him then. Otherwise, they're blotted out in the lake of fire. Everybody else goes into the eternity, the third world age. So the reason we went into this is because once that 5-month-long hour of temptation begins, you don't want to be caught off guard. So you want to look at what could possibly happen according to our Father's Word, looking at it from all angles. So if it does happen to go down the way that I've depicted throughout this Bible study, then you won't be caught off guard when it happens. Everybody else will be freaking out and losing their minds, seeing flying saucers in the sky. Think how people are going to react to that. But if it happens that way, and I'm not saying it's going to, but it could, it very well could. Why else would it be written of in such detail in Revelation 9, Isaiah chapter 5, and the book of Joel? If you were to go there as well, you would see it written of there as well. Perhaps that figures heavily into the equation, and it would make sense. What else would bring the world together in a one-world government immediately? And that would be an existential threat, as this will be portrayed, no doubt. If it goes down like that, this is hypothetical speculation, whereby we're not deceived. Again, it's not necessary that we see the vehicle, so it could happen in a totally different way. But at the same time, it could happen with what's depicted by the hidden dynasty of education, the mainstream media, as an off-world threat, and for that reason all people will come together as one, and then there you'll have your one-world system. Regardless, it's going to be wounded to death, the one-world political system, that is to say, after which Satan will appear as the false Christ. So take it into consideration, look into it for yourself, and whatever you do, don't take my word for it, look into it for yourself. Study to show yourself approved. More information at mark13records.com.